My cheating ex-wife left our daughter at a park like trash. Now she regrets ever crossing me. The day had started like any other, with me buried in a mountain of paperwork. A fresh cup of coffee cooled beside me as I sifted through contracts. My office was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional sound of my pen scratching against paper. It was just another routine day in the life of a man trying to keep everything together. Then my phone rang. Glancing at the screen, a small smile tugged at my lips when I saw Ava's name. My little girl, my entire world. It was unusual for her to call during school hours, but maybe she had forgotten something at home or wanted to tell me about her day. I swiped to answer, expecting to hear her cheerful voice. Instead, what I heard turned my blood to ice. "Dad, help me. They left me. They took Mom's new son, and I'm all alone." My body went rigid. My chair scraped against the floor as I shot up, knocking my coffee over without even noticing. My pulse pounded so violently in my ears that for a moment I thought I had misheard her. But the trembling in her voice, the sheer terror behind those words told me otherwise. "Ova, where are you?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, laced with fear. "And at the park, the big one near Mom's house." "Daddy, please come," she sniffled, trying to be brave, but I could hear the quiet hiccups of a child holding back sobs. I was already grabbing my keys, my mind spinning. How could this have happened? Had they really just left her? My hands shook as I ended the call and immediately dialed Laura, my ex-wife, the woman I had once trusted with my daughter's safety. She picked up after a few rings, her voice filled with amusement. "What now?" she asked, as if this was nothing more than an inconvenience. I didn't even waste time with pleasantries. "And you left Ava alone at a park? What the hell is wrong with you?" My voice was dangerously low, barely contained. There was silence for a second, then a chuckle, a laugh. "Oh, that? Yeah, we forgot her. LOL. She said it so casually, so dismissively, as if she had misplaced a set of keys, not a living, breathing child. In the background, I heard him. Greg, the man she had replaced me with, the man now playing father to my daughter. He was laughing too. My grip on the phone tightened so hard my knuckles went white. "She forgot her?" I repeated, my voice shaking with barely restrained fury. Relax, she's fine. What's the big deal? We were in a rush and we had the baby. She's 7, Laura, 7. You left her completely alone." I couldn't even finish the sentence. My heart was slamming against my rib cage, the rage burning through my veins like wildfire. "Oh, calm down," she said with a dismissive scoff. It was just a joke. She'll be fine." A joke. They thought it was funny. Leaving a child abandoned in a public park wasn't a mistake, wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, cruel, unforgivable. They had no idea what they had just done. They had no idea that this moment, this call, was going to change everything. They had no idea that they were about to regret this for the rest of their lives. I drove faster than I ever had in my life. My hands were clenched around the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were bloodless. My heart was hammering against my rib cage, and my foot was pressed to the gas pedal as if my own life depended on getting there in time. The city blurred past in streaks of concrete and metal. But my mind was only focused on one thing. Ava, my little girl, my 7-year-old daughter, sitting alone in a public park because the people who were supposed to care for her had tossed her aside like she was nothing. I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw ached. When I finally reached the park, I barely remembered throwing the car into park before I was out the door, my eyes scanning the area frantically. The moment I spotted her, my chest tightened painfully. Ava was curled up on a wooden bench near the playground, hugging her knees to her chest. Her small shoulders were shaking, and even from a distance, I could see the way her face was blotchy from crying. A kind-looking older couple sat nearby, glancing around as if they were looking for someone, probably the parents of the abandoned child they had found. Ava lifted her head, and the second her big, teary eyes landed on me, she bolted off the bench and ran straight into my arms. "Daddy!" she sobbed, her little fingers clutching my shirt as if I might disappear if she let go. Tina, I didn't know what to do. They just left. I knelt down, gathering her into my arms, pressing my hand against the back of her head. She smelled like strawberries, her usual shampoo, but it was mixed with the scent of dried tears and panic. "I'm here, baby," I whispered, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "Daddy's here. I've got you." I held her for what felt like forever, waiting for her sobs to subside. My entire body was shaking with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm for her. I couldn't fall apart now. The couple approached hesitantly. The woman, who had graying hair and a soft expression, gave me a small, relieved smile. "Once we found her sitting here alone," she explained gently, said she was crying. "We were just about to call the police when she said you were on your way." I forced my voice to remain steady. Thank you. Thank you for staying with her. Of course, the man said firmly. I have grandkids. I can't imagine. His voice trailed off, anger flickering in his gaze. He didn't have to say it. I knew what he was thinking. What kind of mother does this? I shook their hands, thanked them again, and scooped Ava up into my arms. She clung to me as I carried her back to the car. The moment I buckled her into the back seat, I knew I had to tread carefully. I needed to get her home, make her feel safe, but I also needed to know everything. Ava, sweetheart, can you tell me exactly what happened? I asked as I pulled out of the parking lot, my voice as gentle as I could manage despite the storm raging inside me. She sniffled, rubbing at her eyes. Mom took me and Greg and the baby to the park. We had a picnic. Then I had to go to the restroom. When I came back, she swallowed hard. When they were gone. A sharp pain twisted in my gut. Did you try calling Mom? She nodded. Our phone was off. Unbelievable. Did anyone say anything before you left? Anything about leaving you there? Ava hesitated, then slowly pulled something out of her backpack, her iPad. Auntie, I recorded it, she whispered. For a moment, I just stared. Then, carefully, I took the device from her small hands and opened the voice recordings. The latest one was from earlier that afternoon. I pressed play, and what I heard made my blood run cold. Laura's voice, clear as day, laughing. Let's all leave while she's in the restroom. It'll be hilarious when she comes back. Greg chuckling in the background. Yeah, let's see how long it takes before she cries. Then Laura's mother, oh, Laura, you're terrible. Followed by more laughter. They planned this. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. I could barely breathe past the rage boiling in my chest. But when they thought it was funny, I muttered, my voice deadly quiet. Ava didn't say anything. She just watched me with wide eyes. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I couldn't let her see me like this. I needed to be calm for her. Thank you for showing me this, sweetheart, I said after a long moment, keeping my voice even. You did the right thing. She nodded but didn't speak. When we got home, I made her favorite snack, peanut butter and apple slices, hoping it would help her feel better. She ate quietly at the kitchen table while I sat across from her, watching her closely. I wanted to tell her everything was going to be okay, that her mother would never do this again, that she was safe. But I wasn't going to lie to her, because Laura wasn't just going to get away with this. Not this time. As Ava finished her snack, I stood up, pulling out my phone. I had work to do, evidence to prepare, calls to make. Laura had made a mistake, a grave, unforgivable mistake, and I was about to make sure she would regret it for the rest of her life. I sat at the kitchen table long after Ava had fallen asleep, staring at my phone. My mind was racing, every possible scenario running through my head. Laura had abandoned our daughter on purpose, as a joke. A joke. I clenched my fists, struggling to contain the fury rising inside me. The recording played in my head on a loop. Laura's laughter, Greg's voice egging her on, her mother's dismissive chuckle. They didn't just forget Ava. They deliberately left her behind, entertained by the idea of a 7-year-old girl panicking in a public park. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my rage in check. Losing control wouldn't help Ava. I needed to handle this smartly, carefully, but most of all, I needed to make sure they never got the chance to hurt her again. I grabbed my phone and dialed Laura. She picked up on the third ring. "Oh, now you're calling me," she said lazily, as if I were interrupting her. "Since you abandoned my daughter on purpose," I said, my voice so calm it scared even me. Laura sighed dramatically. "Oh God, are we still on this? She's fine, isn't she? Kids are resilient, you know. She probably already forgot about it." I gripped my phone so tightly I thought it might crack. "Aunt Ava cried herself to sleep tonight," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you even care?" Silence. Then a scoff. "Oh, come on, you're being dramatic. It was just a harmless joke. She was never in danger." "And a harmless joke?" My mind flashed to Ava sitting on that bench, hugging her knees, alone and scared. She hadn't known if anyone would come for her. She hadn't known if she would ever be safe again. "And you think this is a joke?" I asked, voice tight. "And you have no idea what you've done." "But you will." I didn't wait for her response. I hung up. I sat there for a long moment, breathing heavily, trying to calm the storm inside me. I could still hear Laura's laugh ringing in my ears, could still picture Greg sitting beside her, amused at the thought of a terrified little girl. They thought they could brush this off. They thought there wouldn't be consequences. They were wrong. The next morning, Ava was quiet at breakfast. She pushed her cereal around with her spoon, eyes downcast. She hadn't brought up what happened again, but I could tell it was still sitting heavy in her chest. "Sweetheart," I said gently, sitting across from her. "You know what happened wasn't okay, right?" She nodded slowly, but didn't look up. I guess I wasn't important enough for them to remember," she said in a small voice. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Eva, listen to me." I reached for her hand, squeezing it lightly. "You are the most important person in my life. You will always be important. What they did says nothing about you and everything about them. You did nothing wrong. This is not your fault." She finally met my gaze, her eyes searching mine. "Are you mad at me?" she whispered. "Never." I shook my head. "I'm mad at them. And I promise you, I won't let this happen again." She studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. Okay, Daddy." That was all I needed. I dropped her off at school and then drove straight to my lawyer's office. "Full custody," I said to Marcus, my lawyer, as I leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. "That's a big move." "Do you have enough to justify it?" I placed Ava's iPad on his desk and hit play. We sat in silence as the recording filled the room. Laura's laughter, Greg's taunts, her mother's voice, amused, condoning it. When it ended, Marcus let out a slow breath. Jesus Christ. He ran a hand through his hair. "She actually planned this." "She did." My jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt, and I want to make sure she never gets the chance to hurt Ava again. Marcus nodded, grabbing a legal pad. "Okay, we can file for emergency custody first. Given the emotional distress this caused Ava, it'll be a fight, but with this evidence, we have a strong case." "Do it," I said without hesitation. Marcus leaned forward. "You know she's going to retaliate. This is going to get ugly, and don't care." I met his gaze. "Ava comes first. Always." Marcus nodded, already scribbling notes. Laura had made a mistake that was going to cost her everything. That evening, as I sat on the couch with Ava watching cartoons, my phone buzzed. "Laura." I ignored it. A minute later, Greg called, then Laura again. I let them all go to voicemail. I already knew what they wanted. To brush it off, to pretend it wasn't a big deal, maybe even to scare me into backing down. They were too late. I glanced down at Ava, who was curled up against me, her tiny body relaxed for the first time since the incident. I ran a hand through her soft curls, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. No matter what happened next, I would fight for her. Laura thought this would be another one of her games, but this time, she was playing against someone who wasn't willing to lose. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. I had spent the last 2 days preparing, working closely with Marcus to file the custody petition, gathering every piece of evidence that would expose Laura's cruelty. I had also reached out to Ava's school counselor, who had agreed to document her emotional distress after the incident. Every step was calculated, every move carefully planned. Laura had no idea what was coming. At precisely 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before I opened the door. Laura stood there, arms crossed, eyes filled with irritation rather than guilt. Greg was beside her, smug as ever, his hands in his pockets as if he were here for a casual chat. Behind them, Laura's parents stood stiffly, their expressions unreadable. I stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. They walked into the living room, their eyes scanning the space like they were above it, as if they weren't the ones in the wrong. I sat down in the armchair across from them, my face unreadable. Laura perched on the couch, crossing her legs, her expression exasperated. "Oh, right," she said, sighing. "Oh, let's get this over with." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "So you think this is just a casual discussion, Laura?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, my God, are you still on this? We've apologized." "No," I corrected, "when you haven't." Greg smirked, shaking his head. "Oh man, you're really dragging this out. The kid is fine. She's at school, right? Happy, healthy, alive." My jaw tightened. "So you left a 7-year-old alone in a park deliberately." "You laughed about it," I said, my voice sharper now. Laura's mother scoffed. "And it was just a misunderstanding. Children need to toughen up. Ava is far too sensitive." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "Oh, you still don't get it, do you?" I reached for the iPad sitting on the coffee table and pressed play. The room filled with their own laughter. Their voices echoed through the space, every cruel word, every taunt recorded for them to hear. Laura's face drained of color. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Her parents sat frozen, unable to look at me. I let it play in full, let them listen to every second of their own heartlessness. When the audio finally ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Laura was the first to react. "Who recorded us?" she hissed. "Oh no," I corrected. "Ova did. You left her alone, and she knew something was wrong. A 7-year-old girl had more sense than the 4 adults who abandoned her." Laura clenched her fists. "You had no right." "And I had every right," I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. "You don't get to treat my daughter like this and walk away unscathed." Greg finally spoke, leaning forward. "Look, man, you're blowing this way out of proportion." "Fud up." I cut him off sharply, my eyes locking onto his. "You're a pathetic excuse for a man. You stood there and encouraged this, you laughed, you thought it was funny. Well, let's see if you're still laughing after today." Laura's parents stiffened at my tone, their eyes darting nervously between us. "What do you want?" Laura's father finally asked. I sat back, folding my arms. Simple. Effective immediately, I'm filing for full custody. Ava's never stepping foot in your house again. None of you will ever see her unless the court allows it, and trust me, after hearing this recording, they won't. Laura's eyes widened. "Oh, can't do that." "Watch me," I said flatly. Her mother gasped. "You're trying to take a daughter away from her mother over a prank?" I turned to her, my expression unreadable. A prank is hiding behind a door and saying boo. A prank is putting salt in someone's tea instead of sugar. What you did was cruelty. You deliberately abandoned a child for entertainment. That's not a prank. That's neglect. Laura's breathing had picked up. "You can't take her from me," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm her mother." "You're supposed to be," I replied. "But you've made it clear that your new family matters more to you than your own daughter." Greg scoffed. "And what do you think is going to happen? That we'll just roll over and let you win? You're being dramatic. No court is going to take full custody from a mother over one little incident." I smirked. You'd be surprised how much weight evidence holds in family court. Laura's father stood up, furious. "You can't ruin our daughter's life over this. Be reasonable." "Unreasonable?" I repeated, standing up as well. "You're asking me to be reasonable when your daughter left my child abandoned and then laughed about it." Laura's mother grabbed her purse. "Oh, we're leaving," she said, tugging her husband toward the door. Greg and Laura stood too, but before they could reach the exit, I spoke again. "Oh, one more thing," I said, making them pause. "Oh, you should probably warn Greg's clients. Once this gets out, I doubt they'll want to work with a man who thinks child neglect is funny." Greg's face darkened. "Oh, hint." "I would. And I already did." Laura let out a strangled sound, somewhere between frustration and panic. "You're going to regret this," she seethed. No," I said coolly. "Bitch, you are." I opened the door wide, gesturing for them to leave. Laura stormed out, Greg following close behind. Her parents trailed after them, silent for once. I watched them go, my heart pounding but my resolve steady. This was only the beginning. They had made their choice. Now they were going to face the consequences. The door clicked shut behind them, but the tension in the room lingered like a thick fog. I let out a slow breath, my hands still clenched into fists. My entire body felt coiled, ready to strike, but the fight was over for now. I walked to the living room window, pulling back the curtain just enough to watch them pile into their car. Laura was talking rapidly, her hands flying in frustration, while Greg looked like he was barely holding back his own anger. Her parents were stiff, avoiding eye contact with each other, as if they had suddenly realized they had backed the wrong side. Good. Let the panic set in. I let the curtain fall back into place and turned around, my eyes landing on Ava's backpack resting on the couch. That was the only thing that mattered right now. My daughter, her safety, her well-being. Everything else was just noise. I sat down, rubbing my temples as the events of the last few days weighed on me. Laura's reaction had been exactly what I expected, defensive, dismissive, and completely devoid of remorse. She hadn't apologized, not once. She hadn't even asked if Ava was okay, because in her mind, Ava didn't matter, not as much as Greg, not as much as their new baby. That thought alone sent another wave of anger rolling through me. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I frowned. They couldn't be back already. I approached cautiously and peeked through the peephole. "Marcus," I pulled the door open. "You're fast." He walked in without waiting for an invitation, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with sharp focus. He dropped his briefcase onto the kitchen table and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "Unfiled everything," he said, flipping through the pages. "Emergency custody request, the neglect complaint, and the petition for sole custody. The judge has already scheduled a hearing for next week. I exhaled in relief. That fast? When you have a recording of the mother laughing about abandoning her child, the system moves a little quicker, he said dryly. I sat down across from him, my fingers tapping against the table. So, what happens now? Now, Marcus said, leaning back, and Laura is going to go into damage control. She's going to try to spin this as a misunderstanding, claim you're being vindictive. But with this evidence, she's fighting a losing battle. If she had even a shred of self-awareness, she'd back down now. I scoffed. She won't. Oh no, he admitted, which is why you need to be prepared. The second she realizes she's actually in danger of losing custody, she's going to lash out. I nodded. I had no doubt that Laura would fight this. She wasn't the type to accept consequences. She never had been. Marcus pulled out another document and slid it across the table. Also, I think you should post that recording online. I raised an eyebrow. You're my lawyer. Aren't you supposed to tell me not to do that? Normally, yes, he admitted. But public pressure works wonders. If the court of public opinion turns on her, she won't have as much ground to stand on. I hesitated, my fingers brushing over the paper. Ava's voice played in my mind. I guess I wasn't important enough for them to remember. No, they needed to be exposed. I grabbed my phone, opened my social media, and started typing. My ex-wife and her husband deliberately abandoned my 7-year-old daughter at a public park as a joke. They laughed about it. They thought it was funny. Listen for yourself. I attached the recording and hit post. Marcus smirked. And now we watch the fireworks. It didn't take long. Within hours, the post had gone viral. Hundreds of comments poured in, filled with outrage and disbelief. Parents from all walks of life tore into Laura and Greg, their cruelty laid bare for the world to hear. By the next morning, news outlets had started picking up the story. Laura tried to fight back. She posted a statement claiming it had been taken out of context, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was manipulating the situation to paint her as a bad mother. But the public wasn't buying it. Screenshots of her social media posts bragging about her imperfect new family surfaced. Comments she had made about how single dads were always bitter were dredged up. People started digging into Greg's past, finding stories from old co-workers and exes about his pattern of cruelty. It was like watching a castle crumble, brick by brick. And then the final blow came. One of Greg's major business partners released a statement. We do not condone the behavior exhibited in the recording circulating online. Effective immediately, we are terminating our partnership with Greg last name. We believe in upholding values of responsibility, integrity, and kindness, qualities that he has clearly demonstrated he lacks. His entire business started to unravel overnight. I sat back, watching it unfold with quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. Laura had treated Ava like she was disposable. Now the world saw her for exactly what she was, and I wasn't done yet. The court hearing was coming, and when that day arrived, I would make sure there was nothing left of her so-called perfect family for her to hide behind. She had chosen her side. Now she was going to live with the consequences. By the time the court hearing was only a few days away, Laura's life had already started crumbling around her. The internet was relentless. The recording had spread to every corner of social media, with thousands of people condemning her and Greg for what they had done to Ava. Greg's business was falling apart. Clients had pulled out, sponsors had severed ties. Laura, she was scrambling, desperately trying to claw her way back from the mess she had created. But there was no coming back from this. Not this time. I spent the morning going over everything with Marcus, making sure we were prepared for court. The evidence was airtight. The recording alone was damning, but we also had statements from Ava's school counselor, a psychologist who had assessed her emotional distress, and even a written testimony from the elderly couple who had found her at the park. Laura had no idea what was coming. As I was finishing up some paperwork, my phone buzzed. Laura. I let it ring. A few seconds later, a text popped up. "They need to talk now." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. "And there's nothing left to say." Her reply was instant. "I know you're angry, but we can fix this. We don't have to go to court. Let's be adults about this." I scoffed. Adults? She hadn't acted like an adult when she abandoned our daughter. She hadn't acted like an adult when she laughed about it. Now, when she was finally facing the consequences, she wanted to be adults about this? I didn't respond. A minute later, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Laura, it was Greg. I hesitated before answering. "What do you want?" I said flatly. There was a pause, then, to my surprise, he sighed. Look, man, this is getting out of hand. I almost laughed. You're just realizing that now? And I get it, okay? You're pissed. You want payback. But do you really want to destroy Laura's life over this? Fari did that to herself. Greg was silent for a moment, then he let out a frustrated breath. All right, fine, you hate her. I don't blame you. But let's talk about Ava. Don't you think she needs both parents? She needs parents who love her, I said, my voice cold, and not ones who think she's a joke. And it was just a mistake. It was a choice, I interrupted. Sin made her decision. Now she has to live with it. Come on, man, Greg said, his voice growing desperate. Ani, there's got to be something you want. A deal, a settlement. Name your price. Oh, you think this is about money? I nearly laughed. You think I'd sell my daughter's safety for a check? Greg was quiet. Oh, we're done here, I said and hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, shaking my head. They still didn't get it. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protecting my daughter, and nothing, not money, not apologies, not empty promises, was going to stop me from doing that. That evening I sat with Ava on the couch, watching one of her favorite cartoons. She was curled up beside me, her small hand resting on my arm. Daddy? She asked, her voice soft. Yes, sweetheart? She hesitated. Do I have to go back to Mom's house? I swallowed hard. No, baby, you don't. She let out a small breath of relief, then turned her attention back to the screen. At that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what happened in court, no matter what Laura tried to pull, I would never let Ava feel unsafe again. Ever. Laura had chosen her new family. Now I was choosing mine. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The air conditioning hummed softly above us, but the tension in the room made the chill even sharper. I sat at the long table, my fingers interlocked, my body still as a statue, yet my pulse drummed in my ears. Beside me, Marcus adjusted his tie, flipping through a thick binder of documents. Across the aisle sat Laura, her face pale but her posture defiant. Greg wasn't here. That told me all I needed to know. He had abandoned ship the moment it started sinking. Good. She had tried calling me 3 more times the night before. I hadn't answered. She had sent a dozen messages, shifting between anger, desperation, and fake regret. I hadn't responded. Because today wasn't about her. It was about Ava. The judge walked in, a tall man with graying hair and a no-nonsense expression. He took his seat, adjusting his glasses as he surveyed the courtroom. The bailiff called the case, and the judge's eyes landed on Laura first. Miss Carter, I see you are contesting Mr. Reynolds' petition for sole custody. However, based on the evidence provided, I find it necessary to hear an explanation before we proceed. Laura stood, smoothing her blouse, her hands visibly shaking. Your Honor, I admit there was an unfortunate incident, but it has been completely blown out of proportion. My ex-husband has taken a single mistake and turned it into a weapon to take my child from me. Marcus let out a small breath beside me, the kind that said, here we go. The judge nodded. And what is your version of events? Laura shifted slightly, forcing a smile. It was meant to be a harmless prank. We thought it would be funny. So you thought it would be funny? The judge's tone hardened. To abandon a 7-year-old child in a public park? Laura faltered. Well, when you say it like that, how should I say it? The judge asked, raising an eyebrow. Laura opened her mouth, then closed it. Silence. I could almost hear her scrambling in her mind, searching for a way to spin this, but there was nothing she could say that would make her actions sound reasonable. Marcus stood. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to present Exhibit A. The judge nodded, and Marcus walked to the evidence table, setting down Ava's iPad. He pressed play, and the courtroom was filled with Laura's laughter, Greg's voice chuckling beside her, her mother's voice dismissing it as harmless fun. The judge listened intently, his face unmoving as the full recording played. When it ended, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Laura's face had gone completely pale. She was breathing heavily, as if realizing for the first time how damning her own words were. The judge leaned forward. So, Miss Carter, do you still believe this was a harmless prank? Laura swallowed. I didn't mean... A yes or no, Miss Carter? Her voice was barely above a whisper. No. The judge turned his gaze toward me. And Mr. Reynolds, I assume you have further evidence to present? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We have statements from Ava's school counselor as well as a psychologist who evaluated her distress following the incident. Additionally, I have witness testimonies from the couple who found her abandoned at the park. Marcus handed over the documents. The judge flipped through them, nodding slowly. "'Tis is damning evidence, Miss Carter," he said, looking back at her. I'm struggling to understand how you believe this was appropriate behavior for a mother. Laura's hands clenched at her sides. I love my daughter. Then have a strange way of showing it, the judge replied, unimpressed. Laura's voice cracked. Oh, I didn't mean to hurt her. But you did, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was calm, but the weight of my words filled the room. Pun did hurt her, and you laughed about it. Laura's lips parted as if she had a response, but nothing came. The judge exhaled slowly, setting the documents aside. A court takes child neglect very seriously, Miss Carter. Your actions displayed a severe lack of judgment and an alarming disregard for your child's emotional well-being. Given the evidence, I see no reason why Ava should remain in your custody. Laura's breath hitched. Wait. Effective immediately, I am granting full custody to Mr. Reynolds. Miss Carter, you will have no visitation rights until further notice. You may reapply for supervised visitation after a psychological evaluation and parenting courses have been completed. Laura staggered back, her eyes wide. No, you can't do this. This is not a punishment, Miss Carter, the judge said firmly. This is a consequence of your actions. Tears welled in Laura's eyes, but I felt nothing, no sympathy, no regret. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Greg wasn't here to support her. Her parents sat frozen, silent, and ashamed. And Ava was safe. That was all that mattered. The gavel struck, sealing the ruling. It was over. Laura turned to me, her expression pleading. Please, you can't just take her away from me. I met her gaze, my voice steady. A didn't take her away. You threw her away. And now you have to live with that. She let out a quiet sob, but I turned away. This wasn't about her pain. This was about Ava's future, and for the first time in a long time, I knew she would be okay. The moment the gavel struck, sealing the ruling, I felt something inside me settle. It wasn't triumph, and it wasn't relief, not yet. It was something quieter, heavier, like a weight had been lifted. But I wasn't ready to breathe just yet. Laura was still sitting there, stunned into silence, her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, to beg, to scream. Her world had just collapsed, and I could see in her eyes that she was struggling to accept it. But there was nothing left to fight. The evidence had spoken. The judge had decided. Ava was mine now, fully, completely. Laura finally blinked, looking at me. Her face was a mix of anger, disbelief, and something that almost looked like fear. "Owned you really did it," she whispered. "You took my daughter away." I exhaled slowly, standing up. "No, Laura. You threw her away." Her mouth snapped shut, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time, I saw something real in her expression. Not the arrogance, not the casual cruelty she displayed in the past, just the hollow look of someone who had finally realized the price of her own choices. The bailiff called for adjournment, and people started shuffling out of the courtroom. Marcus clapped me on the back, murmuring something about next steps and paperwork, but I barely heard him. My focus was already shifting. I needed to get to Ava. When I arrived at her school, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting on the swing set, her feet kicking lightly against the dirt, her eyes staring up at the sky. I took a deep breath and walked toward her. She noticed me before I reached her, her face lighting up. "Daddy!" She ran straight into my arms, and I scooped her up, holding her close. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. "Hey, sweetheart," I murmured into her hair. "Guess what?" She pulled back, tilting her head in curiosity. "What?" I smiled. "Won't you never have to go back to Mom's house again?" Her eyes widened. "Ever. Ever." For a moment, she just stared at me, processing. Then her small arms wrapped around my neck, squeezing tight.
Can you, Daddy?
I swallowed hard, closing my eyes against the sting of emotions. "You never have to thank me for keeping you safe, baby." I held her for a long time, rocking slightly, letting the weight of everything settle. This was it. We were free. The following days were quiet, almost eerily so. Laura didn't call. Greg didn't reach out. There were no angry messages, no desperate pleas, just silence. I knew it wouldn't last forever, but for now, I took the peace as it came. Ava and I settled into our new normal. Mornings were filled with pancakes and giggles, afternoons with homework and park visits, and nights with bedtime stories and whispered goodnights. She slept peacefully now, no longer curling into herself like she was bracing for something bad to happen. She was healing, and so was I. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Ava glanced up at me. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" She hesitated. "Do you think Mom misses me?" The question caught me off guard. I glanced down at her, seeing the honest curiosity in her big eyes. She wasn't sad, wasn't hurt, just wondering. I thought about it for a moment before answering. "And I think she misses the idea of you, Ava, but not in the way she should." She seemed to think about that for a while, then nodded slowly. "Oh, that's okay. I don't really miss her either." It wasn't said with malice, just quiet acceptance. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I realized something. Ava was stronger than I'd ever given her credit for, and she was going to be okay. We both were. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to feel normal again. Not the kind of normal where I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Not the kind of normal where I had to constantly worry about what Laura would do next. This was a new normal, a peaceful one. Ava thrived in it. Her laughter came easier, her steps lighter. She no longer flinched at the sound of my phone ringing, no longer hesitated when she mentioned things she loved for fear that someone would dismiss her. She was growing into herself in a way that hadn't been possible before, and I finally had the chance to be the father I had always wanted to be. We spent our afternoons at the park, where she raced across the playground, her hair flying behind her as she shouted for me to watch. We made pancakes on Saturday mornings, getting flour everywhere, laughing as she tried to flip them with a spatula twice her size. At night, she curled up in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals, and asked me to read her stories. Sometimes she wanted adventure tales, other times silly ones, but the nights she crawled onto my lap and said, "Tell me a story about when I was little," were my favorite. Because those were the nights I reminded her how loved she had always been, how she had always been wanted, how she would never have to wonder if she was enough. But peace never lasts forever. It happened one afternoon while I was at work. I had just finished up a meeting when my phone buzzed with a notification. Ava's school. My stomach tightened. I answered immediately. "This is Mr. Reynolds." The principal's voice was calm but firm. "To Mr. Reynolds, we need you to come to the school as soon as possible." Ava's mother showed up. I went cold. She what? She came to the school unannounced and demanded to see Ava. When we informed her that she had no visitation rights, she caused a scene. Security escorted her out, but we thought you should be aware. I didn't even remember driving to the school. One moment I was at my desk, the next I was storming through the front doors, my heart pounding like a war drum. The principal met me in the office, his expression serious, and Ava wasn't aware of what happened, he assured me. She was in class the entire time, but I'd recommend talking to her tonight, just in case Laura tries something again. I nodded, my jaw tight. I had known this wasn't over. I had known Laura wouldn't just disappear into the shadows quietly. But knowing it and experiencing it were two different things. She had tried to ambush my daughter at school. That was unacceptable. I thanked the principal, signed out Ava early, and drove her home, forcing myself to stay calm, to not let her see the storm raging inside me. She hummed along to the music on the radio, blissfully unaware of what had happened. But I knew I had to tell her, and I had to make sure she felt safe. That night after dinner, I tucked her into bed and sat beside her. "Sweetheart," I said gently, brushing a stray curl from her face, "I need to talk to you about something." She blinked up at me, her small hands holding her stuffed bear. "It's okay, Daddy." I exhaled slowly. "Mom came to your school today." Her little face scrunched up. "She did?" "She did," I confirmed. But the school told her she wasn't allowed to see you, and she had to leave." Ava was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Why did she come?" she finally asked. "And I chose my words carefully. I think she doesn't like that she lost custody, and now she's trying to act like nothing happened." Ava hugged her bear closer. "Is she going to try to take me?" The fear in her voice nearly shattered me. "No," I said firmly, "she can't. The court made sure of that. And I will never, ever let anything happen to you." She searched my face, and after a long moment, she nodded. "Okay." I leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're safe, sweetheart. Always." She gave me a small smile before turning onto her side, closing her eyes. I sat there for a while, watching her sleep, my heart still heavy with the weight of what had almost happened. Laura was testing boundaries, and I wasn't going to wait for her to cross the next one. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and stepped into the hallway. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed call. Marcus picked up on the second ring, and was wondering when I'd hear from you. "Laura showed up at Ava's school today," I said, my voice low. There was a pause, then a sharp exhale. "All right, time to make sure that never happens again." And just like that, the fight wasn't over. But this time, I was ready. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the phone call from the school, the thought of Laura showing up unannounced, trying to worm her way back into Ava's life like nothing had happened. It made my blood boil. She wasn't going to stop. I knew that now. The custody ruling had been a blow to her, but instead of accepting the consequences of her actions, she was going to fight, manipulate, and push boundaries until she found a crack to slip through. But I wasn't going to let that happen. At dawn, I was already up, sipping coffee at the kitchen table, my phone pressed to my ear as Marcus answered. "Morning," he said, his voice still groggy. "I take it you're not calling just to chat." "Say she showed up at the school, Marcus," I said, cutting straight to the point. He sighed. "Yeah, I figured she might. She's desperate. We need to make sure she doesn't try this again." "Already ahead of you," he said, "when I can file for a restraining order today. Given the court's previous ruling, it should be a straightforward process." "Pud. Do it." Marcus hesitated. "Oh, you know she's going to push back, right? She might even try to take you back to court to fight for visitation." I gritted my teeth. Let her try, because she would lose. We wrapped up the call, and I spent the rest of the morning making sure all of Ava's school records were updated with strict instructions that only I was allowed to pick her up. Every precaution was put in place. By the afternoon, Marcus sent me the confirmation the restraining order was officially filed. Laura would be served within the next 24 hours. She wasn't going to like it, but she wasn't my problem anymore. When I picked Ava up from school, she was her usual bubbly self, swinging her backpack over her shoulder as she hopped into the car. "Daddy, guess what?" she said excitedly. "What?" "We're learning about space," she beamed. "And I told my teacher that I want to be an astronaut when I grow up." I grinned. "Oh, an astronaut, huh? That's pretty cool." She nodded. "Do you think I can do it?" I reached over, ruffling her hair. "Sweetheart, you can do anything you set your mind to." She beamed up at me, and in that moment I felt something shift inside me. This was what mattered. Not Laura, not the drama, just Ava, her dreams, her future. Everything I was doing, the custody battle, the legal fights, the sleepless nights, was for her. And now she had the chance to grow up in a home where she was wanted, loved, and most importantly, safe. That night, as I was tucking her into bed, Ava turned to me with a small frown. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" She hesitated. "Do you think Mom is mad at me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "Why do you ask that?" I kept my voice gentle. She shrugged, picking at the edge of her blanket. Because she doesn't call anymore." I sighed, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Sweetheart, your mom, she's not mad at you. But sometimes people make bad choices, and they have to deal with the consequences." She was quiet for a moment before she whispered, "Do you think she's sad?" I thought about it. Maybe. But Laura wasn't sad for the right reasons. She wasn't mourning the loss of her daughter. She was mourning the loss of control. But that wasn't Ava's burden to carry. "And I don't know, baby," I said honestly. "But what I do know is that you don't have to worry about it. That's my job, okay?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Oh, I just don't want anyone to be sad." My heart squeezed. Even after everything, she still had the kindest heart. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Oh, you just focus on being happy, sweetheart. That's all that matters." She gave me a small smile, then yawned, snuggling into her pillow. "Good night, Daddy." "Good night, Ava." I turned off her lamp and stepped into the hallway, my heart heavy but sure. Ava was safe, she was healing, and no matter what Laura did next, I would always be there to protect her, because that's what real parents do. They don't abandon their children, they fight for them, and I would fight for Ava every single day for the rest of my life.